All right, guys, we're so excited today. We're going to meet Mrs. Brenda Van Hariston, a loving wife, devoted mother, and a true hero. For years, she has dedicated her life to helping her spouse, a Marine veteran who struggles with PTSD. Brenda has also been a constant source of support, love, and encouragement to her husband, and her unwavering dedication has helped him overcome numerous challenges. Brenda's story is one of strength, resilience, and sacrifice. Despite facing many obstacles in her personal life, she's never lost sight of what was truly important, her family. Along with being a supportive wife, she is also a talented musician who has instilled her love for music in her children. Her passion for music has brought her family together and given them a way to connect and express themselves. Brenda's journey has been filled with ups and downs, but she's always managed to emerge stronger and more determined than ever before. She's an inspiration to everyone who knows her, and her story is a reminder that with hard work, perseverance, and a never give up attitude, anything is possible. Brenda, thank you so much for doing this. I can't tell you how much I'm excited about this interview and appreciate that you take your time to do this. So first off, I just kind of wanted to get an idea of who you were, how you grew up. And I know you have an interesting childhood. You grew up in Orange County?
Yeah.
All right. Tell us about Orange County, other than the fact it's super beautiful.
Yeah, born in the OC.
Okay.
Lots of time at the beach. And then when I was about 6, my parents moved us up to the San Fernando Valley. And grew up in Granada Hills for the most part, but still spent a lot of time at the beach.
Okay.
I'm a beach girl.
It's a beach. Yeah. I think that has to be a California thing.
Yeah.
All the pictures I take on my phone, no matter where they end up, they're always by water or by the beach or something like that. So I can totally relate to wanting to be by the beach all the time. You mentioned before, like when we had talked, that you had a great childhood, but you felt a little bit sheltered. And I was wondering if you could talk about that, like in terms of your religion and your faith and being brought up in a strict Christian household and how that kind of affected your childhood. And
I mean, I didn't know it was weird till later. You know, it was all I knew. I was raised in the really conservative church. And, for example, we didn't have TV. I wasn't allowed to go to movies. We didn't celebrate Christmas. I couldn't trick or treat. But on Halloween night, I had to pass out candy and little gospel tracks from our church. So all of my friends were coming by getting candy and a gospel track from me, and I'm like 8 years old. Okay. And then I'd go to school the next day. I'd be in public school. My parents didn't even put me in Christian school, and I got made fun of.
Yeah. That has to be a huge culture shock because I guess the principles of religion or Christianity and then being in a secular environment, those two things clash in such a weird way.
Right, and a lot of Christian kids get to go to Christian school, and so then it's not too weird, but my parents really wanted me to be in public school and to be confident in who I was and how I was raised, and it was hard. I felt weird. But eventually, I felt confident in who I was, and I even defended how I was raised and what I believed.
Yeah. I always felt like there's always a good and bad. There's like a duality to everything, you know? So on one end, sheltered can be like, oh gosh, I was sheltered, I don't know, and I felt like God. But then on another end, you got to see life in more of a...
I did.
Because sometimes I have times where I'm watching TV, even cartoons, and I'm like, I'm not sure I want to watch this, And then to see those things on TV is
and as a result, I spent so much time reading and playing piano. That's all I did in my free time. So music became my passion and reading, and I ended up skipping 2 grades in school, and I went to college when I was 16 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What college did you go to?
I went to Pierce College for 3 years. At the time, I wanted to get a degree in music, and my dad said, nope, absolutely not. What are you going to do with that? I said, okay, then I'm going to go to cosmetology school. And he said, no, you're too young for that, too. You can go get a degree in marketing. Yeah.
One of the pragmatic dads that's thinking about the bottom line.
Yeah.
I think that's not a foreign concept. I think probably all of us have heard that voice. Mm-hmm. But you're a singer and a musician. You've taught your daughter. So tell me about how you got into music and how that affected.
I was not allowed to get a degree in music, but my parents gave me piano lessons. I gave myself voice lessons. I paid for voice lessons. By the time I was 16, I had a full-time job and I was going to college. So I afforded myself things, and I had some amazing opportunities musically that I felt like my parents didn't really support. So I did end up being in a band eventually and kind of gigged a little bit. And then later, when I was about 20 years old, I got asked to sing at a church outside of the church I was raised in. And I became a worship leader for a long time at church, which was really cool.
Yeah, that does sound really cool.
Yeah.
So, have you ever recorded like an actual? You have.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're gonna have to. So, is it on YouTube or on a CD or
no.
any kind of link we can put to it? We're gonna have to do that.
I do have a link to a CD. I think.
So on this video, we're gonna post a link of of your music. You're gonna have to commit to doing that for us. But yeah, we'll be excited to hear that.
Okay.
But now your daughter's also sing and.
Yeah. So I think because I didn't have parents that fully supported me in a music career, once I realized they were talented, I was like, okay, you will play piano, you will play guitar, and I was probably a little bit of a stage mom, but I really pushed and supported. And I have one daughter. She's 25 now, but she's on American Idol and The Voice, and she's doing music full time.
Oh wow!
Now. Yeah.
This is the craziest thing. Like, we see each other, we pass each other at the gym all the time. I would have never known that until just this very second that your daughter was on American Idol. That's hilarious. But, oh man, that's amazing things. So, after that college and all that, you ended up being married at 24.
Yeah.
And I wanted that's one of the main things that we were going to talk about was your first husband and the story behind that. And so I'll back off the question and I'll let you just go with that, and then we'll.
All right. Well, he came over from Vietnam when he was about 3 on a cargo plane with his mom during the war.
Oh wow.
So he had kind of a crazy story. She was a single mom and worked her whole life just to, get him over here and give him a good life. So when I met him at church. We were just good friends for a long time, and one day I just saw him differently. I had a boyfriend, and I was like, I don't feel like hanging out with my boyfriend. This is weird. I just want to be with Kim. And I realized, I had fallen in love with my best friend, and we dated for 3.5 years because he was younger than me. He was still in college, and we ended up getting married when I was 24. He was 22, and he finished college while we were married. By then I had already put myself through cosmetology school because I was determined to be a hairdresser. And I had like 3 jobs at the time. So I finished putting him through college, and then we had a baby about 1.5 years later. And, we struggled as a young married couple, but we had such a great life. And we bought our first house with the help of his mom in Granada Hills, and just kept having babies and built our life around our children.
That sounds like an awesome start, a great relationship. And there's something always to be said about, having a great relationship with your best friend, or at least being best friends with the person you're having a relationship with. So as time went on, you guys were married for what, about 10 years?
We were married 23 years.
23 years? Oh my gosh, how did I get that number off? So 23, after 20, nobody could do that nowadays.
Yeah,
That's
I know. He was in my life longer than he wasn't. You know what I mean? More than half my life.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so after like over 20 years, you guys just end up becoming almost one person in a sense.
Yeah, for sure.
So what ended up happening that, so you lost your husband, he ended up passing away.
Yeah.
And so, can I ask what he passed away from?
2015. He had just started a new job, and he had just had flu symptoms and kind of not feeling good all week. And by Friday, I said, do you want me to drive you to work? And he's like, no, I think I'm okay. I said, well, I'm going to make you a doctor's appointment. And I did, and he didn't go. He was so busy at work. He was like, honey, I couldn't go. I was just too busy. Maybe tomorrow. So he had to go into work Saturday, and I was at home working, so I have a salon at home now, and I was raising the kids and working at the same time, and I texted him, how are you feeling? And he goes, not great. And I took one bite of pizza, that's it. And I said, okay, so on your way home, please stop at urgent care. There's an urgent care in Porter Ranch. Please stop on your way home. So he did, and they were closed. He came home Saturday night. I was still working. And later on in the evening, I went and checked on him. He was in bed, and I said, I really think we should go to urgent care or the emergency room. And he said, no, I just want to sleep. Just let me sleep. Let's go in the morning. And I did. I let him go to sleep, and I ran to the store and got him Gatorade and some other things he asked for. And about 2:30 the next morning, I woke up to him just sitting up on our bed trying to breathe. And I said, what's wrong? And he said, I don't know. I can't. I feel like I can't breathe. I said, okay, we're going to the emergency room right now. So I started getting him dressed, and he put his hand on his heart, and he said, I feel like I'm dying. It might be my heart. And I went to grab my phone to call 911, and he literally fell over and died in front of me. I didn't know he died, though. I thought he passed out. By this time, my kids were awake, knowing something was not right. And I said, he's not feeling good, but just stay in the other room. My daughter's boyfriend had slept over that night, or they were still hanging out. And when he fell over, I called him in. I screamed for Russell, and Russell came in and started CPR. Thankfully, I have a fireman friend right across the street. We literally yelled his name, and he came running. And he did CPR for about 20 minutes while the fire department were on their way. So all this time, I didn't know my husband had already died. I just thought he passed out. He didn't feel good. And the fireman friend, who my husband and I were both really close to, took me in the hallway, and he said, it doesn't look good. I worked on him for 20 minutes. I couldn't find a pulse, and I just want to tell you, I don't think he's going to make it. I think he knew he had already passed away. I just didn't know that. So, the hours after that are what's kind of crazy when I look back on it, because what happens next is the police department shows up, and they start asking you, why does your husband have a bruise on his head? Were you fighting? How long were you married? Did you have a good marriage? What's that bottle of pills? He had some antibiotics. And so I start realizing, like,
they're trying to interrogate you.
Yeah, they could blame me for his death. I had no idea how he died. So that was kind of crazy. And then the coroner shows up. My husband's body's literally on the gurney with the bag zipped up to here. Because they said, do you want to take one last look at him? And it's in my entryway right by the front door. They just leave it there. And I said, no, I really don't want to. I've seen enough. The coroner shows up, sits me down at the dining room table, and asks me all the same questions the police did. And this is all within like 2 hours. And I'm still trying to grasp that my husband's gone. And so the coroner said, we won't have an answer for you until about 4 weeks. I'll give you a call. That same morning, I had to call his mother and tell her that her only child just died. Her only child. That she lived her whole life and worked her whole life for.
So so you said your kids were present during that time. And so how did you manage them and then with the gurney being in the middle of the house at the same time?
Okay, that's a good question. Actually, 2 of them were present, my oldest and my youngest. My middle one had slept over at a friend's. So my husband's body was still in our bedroom, and when my oldest went to go pick up the middle daughter, she took the baby daughter with her, and that's when they brought the body out.
So you had the ability to make sure they weren't present.
Okay. I think they took the body out before they got back. Now my kids had the option to see him again, a few days later, and I opted not to. I can't remember what my kids. I can't remember.
Yeah,
that
part
must
have been
blur.
Traumatic. I mean, the whole experience must have been. So now you're calling his mom, and then tell us about that conversation. And
she's Vietnamese, and pretty dramatic. She's it's a different culture,
Sure.
so they react differently. And she just screamed for about 30 minutes, wailing on the other end, and she was about an hour and a half away. So it was crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, and he's been gone 8 years. For the past 8 years, she's blamed me off and on. She'll still say, I don't know how he died. I mean, it's just weird. She's implied that maybe I had something to do with it.
Yeah, that's got to be a grief mechanism, or hopefully something that.
It's not hurtful, because I know it's not true, and I understand it doesn't make sense to her.
And I guess it is. It's hard to make sense, or try to make sense of things that are just so difficult to have to come to grips with.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine being in that position either, or your position as well.
And people might be wondering how he died. So I've told the story so many times. He had an abscess in his prostate, and it made him septic. So all the flu symptoms he had was
a result of that.
sepsis. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you end up coping? Because obviously the grief must have been unbearable for such a long period of time. So now you're in this emotional limbo, so to speak. How did you, or what was your first step in trying to put the pieces back together?
What's crazy is I feel like I struggle more with grief now than I did then, because he died on Super Bowl Sunday, and 3 days later, that Wednesday, I was working. I had no life insurance. We were in a huge house that he and I could not afford together. It was a constant struggle. And I was like, I have no freaking idea how I'm going to make it or support my kids. Mm-hmm. So I didn't even give myself time to grieve, really.
It's almost like a automatic fight or flight.
100%. 100%.
Survival mode.
Yeah.
I wonder if you yourself had PTSD in some sense as well.
Absolutely, I do, and we can talk about that later, how it plays out in my relationship with Justin. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now you're working. You're trying to put the pieces back together. How long did it take before you started to feel a little bit more even, or where you were trying to get back into the normalcy aspect of things?
That's a good question.
Or you were no longer consumed with the grief is probably a better way to phrase it.
My kids remind me more of how I was in the beginning. So I would work all day and make sure they had everything they needed, and then I would literally just go lay in my bed all night. And their friends would always be our house is the hangout house, so all their friends would be over. They're all like my kids, so they would all come in my bedroom to see me, and I remember they would literally have to walk over piles of laundry in my room to get to me, and it was kind of embarrassing, but my room was just always cluttered, and I think that was how the depression showed itself a little bit. I only had enough energy to work, buy groceries, and make sure my kids were okay. My room was a complete disaster. And I think I was like that for about 1.5 years or 2.
Do you feel like the work and keeping your head inside of that world was a coping mechanism?
100%. I love my work, and all my clients are friends, and so the social aspect kept me normal, kept me feeling normal, but it's draining too. Being a hairdresser is draining.
I was about to say, because that's got to be an interesting emotional dichotomy too, right? Because hairdressers a lot of times can be therapists for other people.
100%. I always say I'm a
getting
therapist.
Their hair done, they're with you for an hour or so, and they're spilling their life story to you.
Absolutely.
And at the same time, you're going through all of this trauma on your own. Did you end up seeking therapy at all on your own?
Didn't.
Never did. You just dealt with it like that.
Yeah. And clients would say crazy things like, "Oh, Brenda, I know what you're going through. My dog died a few months ago."
Oh my gosh.
I mean, craziness.
That's when you just shave them bald in one stroke.
Exactly. Those things just made me so angry, but I had to be gracious, and most of my clients were so loving, and understanding. Are you sure you want to be working right now? I remember I posted on Instagram, please call me and make an appointment. Please don't back off because you think I'm taking time off because I just lost my husband. I need your business.
Mm-hmm.
It's all I have, you know? And my clients really appreciated me just being honest because they were like, yeah, we weren't going to call for appointments. But when you know, reached out and said you needed us to, then we did. And it's been a blessing.
So was there a point where you felt that you had a hold of the grief, or did you just not face it and you just kind of just plugged forward? Is that how you kind of...
I'm not really... I don't have the personality that wants to just sit in my feelings. If I had a moment, because I would still dream of him. I still do. Or if I had a thought, I would maybe give myself 2 minutes to cry and then, okay, time to get back to work. Yeah, I just... No time for that.
I have some crazy dreams that we'll share after this. But I have had very close people to me that have died of cancer and other illnesses. I've also had. We'll get into those dreams later. But
and they feel so real, right?
I wonder sometimes. That's how vivid they are, and the fact that I can still remember them in such detail is what makes me think that sometimes
they're visiting.
Yeah, something like that. But I would probably be thought of as pretty crazy, just to have put that out there. So we'll start that. Okay. We'll do that more in private. But so as you went on through these stages of grief, and obviously you're going through so much. Mm-hmm. Now you're in a position where you're all by yourself and you're living on your own. What skill sets, or what do you think you felt you learned by being by yourself and now doing everything on your own? What were your takeaways from what you learned from that and who you became as a result of that?
I think I was already pretty independent, and my parents raised me with really, really good work ethic because we didn't have a TV or anything else to waste time on. So I was always working. So that part wasn't hard. I think, I had a best friend that I woke up with and had coffee with every single morning. So I remember that being the hardest part in the morning, changing my routine. I would take my daughters to school and then come home and feel really sad because I'm having my cup of coffee by myself at the table. So I changed that. I made my coffee and took it in the car and drank it on the way to school. So I just started changing routines so I wouldn't feel sad. And then I think I had to sort of put my grief aside, honestly, to just be stable for my kids.
Yeah. That's got to be such a, I don't know if it's a tough thing to do or maybe an instinctive thing to do, because your kids are so reliant and you have such an instinct to want to be a mama bear to your kids that I wonder if some way that that just became an automatic reaction in some sense.
Yeah, and they have so many moments of sadness that you want to be strong for them, and you also, I didn't want to stress them out or ever worry that we were going to be okay. Yeah. So I literally just tried to be superwoman.
So what were their biggest reactions, or what did you see in them that changed or that you had to address in terms of their emotional reaction to their dad passing?
Well, the oldest one was, she kind of became the rock for all of us and probably didn't deal with her grief because
she's
of that.
Mommy.
Yeah, exactly. The middle one went crazy and got pregnant a year later after he died at age 18. The younger one, I felt like she got emotionally stuck a little bit. She was 11 when he died and super clingy and dependent on me. Mm-hmm. And that was draining for a little bit,
There must have been that fear in her that,
100%. I couldn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's got to be an intense situation. All three at the same time. You're trying to manage 3 different psychologies, 3 different stages of life.
Totally, 3 different personalities, right. 3 different stages of life. And I wanted a life. I wanted to be, because I'm an extrovert. I like people. I wanted to socialize, but my youngest one, my baby, just did not ever want me to leave the house. So that got hard. But if she ever had a sleepover with a friend, I was like, okay, I'm out of here. That's when I started dating, when I think she was in junior high, and started sleeping over at friends' houses. Yeah.
So when you did start dating, was there a tendency for you to compare everybody you dated to your...
That's a good question. I don't think I did any comparison until I got married. Poor Justin.
And then you were like, oh, you're not like him at all.
Poor Justin.
That's funny.
No.
Now I'm going to rib him on that later on. I'd be like, hey, you're not like... Although he may knock me out, so I'm going to stay away from that now, I think, on that end. So we'll have to see. Yeah. So were your children happy that you were dating again, or was that a difficult thing to
The
also
two older
go through?
ones were really supportive. Like, Mom, we just want you to be happy, go have fun. And that's all I was doing, was meeting new people, making new friends, a little traveling around the world a little bit. The youngest one really wasn't fully aware that I was dating, because again, she was my priority, and I only went out if she wasn't home. So I did that until she was 16 years old, when Justin came into the picture.
So you kept it very careful and away from the 11-year-old for the most part.
Yeah, I really didn't have boyfriends. I didn't bring anybody home. It was just casual dating.
So the other two daughters, how did they feel about your dating process, or were they on board with that, or was it hard to...
They never seemed upset about it. Okay. They were just like, Mommy, we want you to be happy, and just be careful, and don't bring any crazies home.
not bad guidelines.
Yeah.
So as you're meeting Justin and you're going through the dating process with him, did you ever have a guilt or feeling that you had to stop loving one for the other, or were you able to kind of manage the two emotions? That's an interesting question. No, I never felt guilt about loving somebody else, but because it's just different, but I think I have felt guilt for... You always think you could have loved your husband more or better. I still have regrets. Like, maybe I didn't do enough when we were married. Maybe I didn't show him enough love. I mean, it definitely makes me not take my relationship with Justin for granted, because I feel like I could lose him at any moment. And I love differently now. Yeah. It's funny, because I think losing somebody that you're very close to, and then remembering all the things that or for me personally, all the things I wish I said or could have done or should have relayed. And then I could totally understand exactly what you're saying with that. And I actually made a point of doing that too. Like, I had a friend of mine, again, he had brain cancer and all kinds of different ailments. And when I first heard about it, I made a point of calling him. I'm like, look, I have these regrets in my life about not saying what I should have said or wanted to say. While he was still alive? While he was still alive. Wow. And so I made a point of telling him, look, I made this mistake in the past, and with you, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, Wow. And then we made kind of a funny thing where I just said, okay, so when you do die, because he's still alive, which is crazy. But I just said, okay, we're gonna have to make a deal where you're gonna have to come visit me after your passed. Wow. So we were able to make light of the whole thing, but there was a part of it where I said, look, I've made this mistake where I haven't said everything that I wanted to say and do everything what I wanted to do. So I'm gonna make it right. And so whatever grievances we had with each other, I cleared those, and whatever apologies that I needed to make, I made those. That. And whatever closure, all the things that I should have done in the past, I really try to do this time around. So, it's got to be the hard thing to look back and say, okay, I should have done this, I could have done this, and
I was
it could
always
eat away.
just stressed out mom. My first husband, or my late husband, loved life because he came from Vietnam.
Sure.
He's like, all I want to do is live. I want to surf, I want to ski, I want to fish. He did everything. He picked up a new sport every year. And I really allowed him to do that. I kind of held it down financially. And I did let him live, but I was always stressed out too.
It's an interesting dichotomy, you know, and I've had this conversation with so many people. Like, it's funny how pain and pleasure, you know, sadness and joy, they all live in the same line. You know, you can't have one with the other.
Yeah.
And can a person know true joy without knowing true suffering? Can someone know true happiness without experiencing true sadness? And
probably not.
And it's great to hear that your first husband had an opportunity to be in a world. So India is very much, I think, probably considered. I mean, it is considered a third world country, and so coming from that type of environment into the United States, which is kind of a heaven, you know, for so many different ways, and to allow him to have lived his life or to experience that joy, that's really nice that you gave him a platform to do that.
He was a big kid, and anybody that knew him knew he just wanted to live and have a good time.
Well, I hope you live with the joy that you did give that to him.
I think
and
I did.
That's a huge thing.
But I could have done better, and
you know, looking back and going over it over again like that, like it's hard to say. You know,
I don't beat myself up.
Yeah,
but
that's a hard thing to try to.
What's interesting is you never lose that. It's not like my love for Justin has replaced my love for Kim.
Right.
You know, I love Kim. He's the father of my kids, and we had an amazing 23 years. And things I think about still make me laugh. I'll have moments where I'm driving and just a thought will hit me or a memory, and I'll start crying. You know, it's just going to always be like that.
Sure.
But it doesn't mean I don't have amazing love for Justin.
So you didn't have necessarily a hard time learning to love again, it sounds like, or you were able to...
I think I'm a romantic and passionate, and I love people in general.
So it was just a natural thing in some sense to be able to do that for yourself. That's good. That's a good strength to be able to have, and obviously it's a skill set that helped you transition well.
Well, Justin forced me into...
Forced you into the marriage?
Yeah, I never planned on getting married again. Yeah.
Yeah, that... yeah, it is. It's a huge commitment, you know, and marriage is such a special thing.
Yeah.
And it should be, it should be taken seriously. Some people do that, like they get married and they want the wedding, but it's not. They don't really want the marriage part, you know. Like
my mom used to say, make sure it's somebody, you know, it's somebody you cannot live without or you don't want to live without. Like, just always ask yourself that question, and that's kind of what it came down to with Justin. Yeah, I don't want him out of my life.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
That's cool. So, what do you think were some of the uncertainties of the dating process as you went through? Because there must have been so many different aspects of that, right? Because you have your kids, and now you're kind of nearly single, not by choice. So, how did you maneuver or go through the dating process, and like?
Oh, how did I meet people?
Yeah, and also manage like the kids aspect of it, because you know, dating with kids has got to be interesting phenomenon, because you have to also consider them, and then the person you're dating no longer is just dating you, or you're not just dating him, but there's other elements that need to be considered in order for the guy to even just be viable, right?
Yeah.
So tell us about how did you get through the dating process?
Well, first of all, I started on dating apps because, you know, 5 years ago that was the thing. So I was on Bumble and Tinder and just curious, like, who's out there? And it was fun to swipe. And I would just meet people, have a good conversation for a few days, and then maybe meet up for dinner. I only came across one person that I had something serious with, but I really didn't introduce him to my children. He was a traveling musician. I told the one daughter that I knew could handle, so she asked me lots of questions. So I said, okay, I am dating someone. But the other two, I just protected them from it. I didn't tell them. I felt like it would be really selfish to do that to them until I knew I was serious about somebody and they might be a part of my life permanently. I didn't. I just went on a lot of dates.
So what were, like, if you were going to introduce a guy that to your children in the dating process, what would have been the qualifications, or what prevented you from introducing this particular guy to your kids?
He was a lot younger. He was a traveling musician. I think I knew in the back of my head it wouldn't work out. And it was just, I did have feelings for him, but I knew that it wouldn't be long term. So what's the point?
So the stability part of it, or
I ended up cutting it off when I saw that he couldn't really give me a commitment. He was building a career, so I was understanding, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to date other people.
So does that, from that, does that lead into Justin, right?
Yeah. You know what? Not really. So that was I cut that off in 2017. I dated for 2 more years, meeting people, maybe when I was out, or some of them. I actually met an NBA player on Bumble. I was at the beach one day, got a message from him, hey, do you want to go to dinner? I said, oh, I'm at the beach. How about tomorrow? He goes, oh, I'm going to be in San Francisco playing against the Warriors. Why don't you fly out? It was crazy. He ended up flying me to Paris for a week. And I had amazing experiences like that. Yeah. And I didn't really want to give that up. I'm like, maybe I'll meet an NFL player next. So for the next 2 years, I just had a good time meeting people and going places. And it was like, I didn't mention that when I got married at age 24, I was a virgin. I didn't date a whole lot before that marriage. Yeah. That was required pretty much of my parents.
Yeah. I think that's a religious norm, right? That they really try to instill that type of...
So I think at some point I was really excited to date and meet people because I didn't do that at all when I was young. Yeah.
So what ended up leading to Justin, and how did you guys meet, and then how did you end up getting married and all that kind of stuff?
Okay, met him on Tinder, and I didn't know, but he was out here at Sober Living, like trying to get sober. He had come out from Seattle, so we met on Tinder. We talked a little bit. He sent me a paragraph about this long, just here, I'm a Marine, I have PTSD, I have 2 kids, blah, blah, blah. I was like, whoa. Okay. But he just wanted to tell me everything ahead of time. So we planned a date, and I said, I'll come pick you up in Hollywood. I just felt more comfortable having my car. And he didn't know his way around that much. And I'm like, there's a bar, down the street we can go to. So he texted me and said, do you want to kiss right when you get here? And I was like, okay. We hadn't. It was kind of crazy, but it was cute. And,
one thing I admire about Justin is that he's very open and honest about who he is and what he's been through.
Yes.
And just to let everybody know, because we're just jumping into this conversation so fast, Justin is a former Marine, and he did a few tours, right? Like in Iraq, was it? Mm-hmm. And he's a former veteran who does suffer from PTSD, and has really faced it, I think, pretty strongly, And it sounds like he's really been through a lot. But what's leading us into this conversation, too, is one of the things that Justin mentioned in terms of what helped him cope with his PTSD the most and to help kick his drug addictions was you. And so part of this interview, what I'm so curious about is, what is it about Brenda that turned Justin, into a more positive path? And so just to bring everybody up to date on who Justin is, and then, let's go ahead and continue with how you met and how you ended up getting married.
So he did drugs for 15 years after he got out of the Marines because he couldn't deal with the memories and the guilt and the PTSD. And when I met him, I didn't know this, but he was here trying to get sober, but he had been up for 48 hours smoking meth. The night I met him, he had been awake for 2 days. So I didn't know that until we get to the bar and we're having a drink, and he starts bawling his eyes out. He cried for 3 hours on our first date and told me his whole story. And I don't think I would have known the answer to your question until recently, because recently I asked him, and we were kind of having a disagreement, and I said, do you even know why you love me? What do you love about me? I've never heard you say it, you know? And he answered it, and he said, I've never met anybody like you. Since the day I met you, I've wanted to be just like you. You're just loving, gracious, forgiving. There's just this loving quality about you. Like, you're the closest thing to Jesus I ever met. That's what he said. And this was just back in October when we went on our honeymoon that we didn't get to go to during COVID.
But you guys did go on that honeymoon,
did.
right?
We
okay, so
went.
went to Hawaii, was it,
yeah,
right?
in 2022. So it was so nice to hear that, because he's not very good at expressing himself, and he's never really said why he was in love with me. But anyways, that first night on our date, he basically told me everything he had been through, and he said, you know, I'm an atheist. He just threw that out there. And I went, you are? And he goes, yeah, I don't believe in God. I was like, oh, I actually don't believe that. And he goes, why? And I go, I think that's a cover for your pain. I think it's easier to say you don't believe in God because you think God wouldn't forgive you for everything you've done. And that's when he started crying. And he cried for literally 3 hours. And at the end of that date, he said, are you going to church this weekend? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't go every weekend. And he goes, well, can I go with you? And I said, okay, first of all, don't go to church for me because that's not going to impress me. But if you want to go, I'll take you. And he goes, yeah, I want to go.
Yeah.
And
that's got to be a good feeling that somebody recognizes your value in the sense that where he says, okay, you know, or where you say, you know, what is it that you exactly love about me? And then he's able to say, okay, you know, you're an inspirational person and you have these qualities that led me to this place. Because I think for so many people, it's easier, and I don't know why the mind is this way, but it's easier to believe the negative things about a person or oneself.
Yeah.
And we're a lot of times self-critical or, you know, our own worst enemies in a sense. And to have the reinforcement to know that you have these qualities and this is why somebody specifically loved you, that should be probably a pretty big ego boost for you in a sense. Like, I'm Brenda, you know, what's up?
It also motivates you to just be a better person and live your life like that. When you realize how somebody sees you, it's motivating to be that person every day. Sure. You know? So
now you're with Justin and, you know, he has PTSD and he let you know like right up front. So which again, I think is a really admirable thing.
Which by the way, when he said PTSD, I just thought that meant like he had bad nightmares at night, right?
Yeah. People don't.
There's so much more. There's like a layer of depression, a layer of flatness. Like sometimes he has no personality. He's just flat, you know?
There was a point in the middle of our conversation and when I was talking to Justin where he looked at me and goes, you look just absolutely blown away. And I think it's partially for the same reasons. Like, I have this idea of PTSD, but it's actually much deeper and much more intense of a condition than we give it credit for. I think. You know, I wonder if some people try the, you know, like let's just fix this part of it and not listen. And so I was wondering how you managed that line, because I probably would imagine that you wanted to fix it for him, but it's kind of a process. So how did you separate listening from trying to fix the situation?
I feel like you know me. I'm such a fixer. My kids will be like, Mommy, I just want to tell you what's wrong. Don't try to fix it. I'm like, that's what moms do. Yeah, I never thought that I wanted to fix him, but I knew that he had a good heart. I just knew his heart was good and that he deserved love and he deserved to feel loved. and he felt so worthless when I met him. It broke my heart. And so some might call it codependent, but I'm just kind of naturally a giver, a servant, a lover. And I was like, I want to love him back to life, you know? And it was like my mission.
I think that's so lucky for him and so gracious of you to be able to do that. Like, one of the discussions I did have with Justin, and this went a little bit more in the political conversation, but it's how we treat our veterans when they get back. It seems like we have plenty of money to put into the Pentagon and to go to war, but then, and this is actually the thing that I said to Justin. It's like, when we say to you, a military person who's come back from war, thank you for your service, does it feel like a cliche to you? Does it feel like something
What was his answer to that?
I have to go back into that, but it was something along the lines of, it's a lot deeper than what, people give it credit for, and what the troops and the people coming back from war are going through is something that is sanitized for the rest of us that are really watching it on TV, like, I hate to say it, but almost kind of like a soap opera. And it's not fair to these troops. They come back and they're suffering these afflictions. But in Justin's case, I think it's very lucky that he had you to kind of guide him through it on that end. Because I think a lot of people that have PTSD, I wonder if people look at them and say, hey, just get over it, or have that just get over it attitude.
Well, and a lot of veterans are just not talking about why they have PTSD. And I don't know what Justin shared with you, but he never even wanted to tell me the main thing that triggered it and that he lived with every day. He used to say, if every time I see like a 12-year-old boy, it triggers me. But he didn't want to tell me the story. And when I heard him talking to a therapist, I overheard the story, and I was bawling my eyes out. And now I understand what he lives with.
Yeah.
And he's also just a very sensitive person. And, I know veterans who've gone on and live a normal life, but Justin can't live with the memories and the things he's done. He can't look at it like, well, I was serving my country, I was told to do that. He just has a lot of guilt about what he had to do.
I think that really came through about Justin too, is that he's emotionally multi-layered, and that he is reflective and looks at things in a deeper way than I think maybe, I'm sure a lot of people do, and everybody that has to cope with coming back must cope with it in different ways.
Right.
But the fact that he's facing it, or the way that he faced it, I admired the way that he did that.
Yeah.
So how did you maintain your patience and how you and what was your experience with, obviously has this element of volatility, right? PTSD, and there has to be mood swings, anger, sadness, bouts of happiness in between all of that. So how did you maintain your ability to stay patient during
We've
those?
had some rough moments, some real ups and downs. I mean,
give us an example of a rough moment and how you managed through it.
If I had to talk to him about something, he, in the beginning, would just explode. And I would ask him to leave. And he would leave. Sometimes he slept in his truck.
So the context of what made him explode, was it contextually something that was critical, or was it something that had to do specifically with something he went through? Or?
Maybe just something I was asking him to work on in the marriage. I think he always felt defensive, and there were times where I'm like, you're the perfect husband, I kind of idolized him. I mean, he's beautiful, he's got a perfect body, he's not hard to look at, and so I think it was easy to let a lot of things slide in the beginning, and then eventually I was like, I want this to be a real marriage, and I don't want to make the same mistakes I made in my first marriage. Like, I want to be real, and I want to be vulnerable with each other. And so I've really been pushing him to do that, and it hasn't been easy, but he's been so responsive to it all.
So what mistakes do you feel you made in your first marriage that you were trying to relate?
Keeping the peace. I had a narcissistic mother, so I was taught to keep the peace,
Mhm.
whatever it took. Brush everything under the rug, just keep the peace. So if I was upset, I didn't tell my husband. If he was out playing golf and I was working my ass off, taking care of the kids and paying the bills, I was resentful inside at times, but I didn't talk about it. And that affected my feelings towards him. And I didn't want to ever feel that way towards Justin. And then something happens when you're a woman and you're 50. Something happens and you're like, I don't care. I don't care what you think anymore. You're going to hear the truth.
So tell us about that. Is that, you think it's a form of wisdom that you come to know who you are and what you expect and what you want, and you're able to kind of let go of
I do.
the predispositions of the past?
Yeah, I used to say maybe it's menopause. I mean, it might be partly, but yeah, I just think, women spend many of their years caring about what everybody around them thinks and taking care of everybody. And then you reach a point where you're like, I cannot do any more than I'm already doing. And I really don't care what anybody around me thinks. I mean, when my daughter got pregnant after my husband died, the caring in me just went away, because I knew everybody from church was probably really judgmental about that situation. I'm like, I don't care. She didn't go abort the baby. She's having the baby. She's going to be a single
Funny
mom.
how the church works that
yeah,
way, right?
Exactly. Correct. Absolutely. So, yeah, I think after my husband died and my daughter got pregnant, I was like, I give 2 middle fingers to everybody. I don't care what you think, because nobody walks in my shoes. You have no idea what I've been through. And then a strength comes from that, and you are able to be honest and vulnerable, even if it's like risky in the relationship.
So when Justin's going, well, I mean, I'm sure he's still dealing with PTSD every day, but did you attend therapy sessions with him?
No, I kind of set him up with some therapy sessions, and I listened to just one of them because I really wanted to hear his story, but I didn't want to make him tell me. But other than that, I've never really sat in on the therapy. He started doing therapy because he knew that military compensation was available to him for his PTSD, as long as he did the therapy.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I'm glad that
yeah.
that he did do that.
Yeah.
So the one call that you did listen in on, did it give you a better understanding of what he was?
100%. I think because of what I've been through and the trauma I've been through, I really do have I have this, I have an attitude like, just suck it up. Even with my kids, like, really, you're crying over that? Just freaking suck it up. I don't cry a lot, like, I'm pretty tough. And so maybe part of me thought Justin was being a little dramatic about war. So when I heard him tell the story, yeah, it broke my heart for him.
Yeah. I've heard of war on the other side of it, where the person was a young kid and saw a bombing that occurred at a school, and the way it was described to me was in brutal terms. And it's hard. It's hard to understand from a layman's perspective what the theater of war really is. And even to this day, even hearing it or being emotionally connected into what I was hearing and the person that I was hearing it from, it still doesn't completely sink in, because obviously I wasn't just right there on the front line with it. But I do think that people severely underestimate what people come back with from serving out there, So.
And like you said, we really don't take care of our veterans. They're just like disposed of.
Yeah.
And
that's the part that really hits me, is that part of it. Like I guess politically you can justify one thing or another. Oh, was this a righteous war? Was this a good war or a bad war? But at the end of the day, people are losing their sons or their daughters or their mothers or their fathers, and when they come back for whatever they felt they were serving in a noble cause for, that they don't get taken care of on the way back in.
yeah.
It it hits a whole other nerve that can't be entirely, and it feels helpless sometimes, because as citizens we can vote and we can protest, but how do we make an active change is just such a difficult thing to know how to do. And
yet every day people are still joining the military, and
they
have no idea what's on the other end,
God bless those people. I hope they come back safe, and I hope they get the care that they need when they do come back. And I don't know, but so at the end of the day, like, how were you able to create an environment that ended up making Justin feel so safe?
Well, I really doted on him. I treated him like a queen. I mean, not a queen.
You hear that, Justin?
He's sort of a queen. I treated him like a king. I still do. I mean, he came into a really hard situation, too, with, me and 3. I'm an alpha. My girls are pretty alpha. Like, we're all independent. We're a strong household. And he walked into that, and a granddaughter already. And it would be intimidating for anybody. And for him to find his place took a while.
So when you guys first got married, obviously you had your kids, and there's a dynamic between your kids and Justin. Not that he's just a new person, a new husband, new father figure. He's also dealing with this affliction. So how did you manage to bridge that gap between your kids and your new husband, and the stuff that he went through, and then obviously he was raised a certain way, and now you're trying to meld all these type of different things together?
I think that was the hardest part, because there was a lot of conflict in the beginning, because he didn't know his place. Do I step in a situation? Do I act like a dad? Do I act like a grandfather? And I felt defensive of him in the beginning, but then I understood that they were uncomfortable with him trying to step in certain situations. So I think he naturally took a step back and was like, I'm not going to try to be a dad, or maybe not even a grandfather yet, and just let these kids learn to love me. And he's just naturally become a friend to them, I think. And they'll even say, Mommy, it just wouldn't feel normal if Justin wasn't here. We'd be so sad if he wasn't.
So it evolved into a situation
and
where...
they appreciate his energy and who he is. Yeah.
That's awesome, too.
Yeah.
So, for so many people going through PTSD or the loss of somebody, if you were to give maybe 2 or 3 points to help them go in the right direction, what would you say your life takeaways are from what you've experienced?
Well, first of all, I pray a lot. And my first prayer, literally the morning that my husband died, I said to God, don't ever let me wake up one morning not knowing that my husband has passed away. I don't want to relive it. Help me to wake up every day knowing he's gone. And God answered that prayer. I never woke up going, where's Kim? Never, ever. And so I pray a lot. I kind of ask God for wisdom in my life, and I look for signs to guide me. The other thing I would say is I've always focused on what I do have and all the blessings I have. For example, when my husband, I have so much gratitude, because here I am in this big house that we could barely afford together. When my husband died, my dad said, oh, you got to sell this house. There's no way you can keep this house. You better put it on the market right now. And my realtor, who's also a client of mine, said, you do everything you need to hang on to this house, because this will be your retirement someday. You don't know if you're going to be remarried, or you do what you have to hang on to this house. And that was the best advice I got. I ended up, creating spaces on my property to rent and hang on to the house. So every day I would just go, I can't can't believe I'm still in this house. And I still have clients that come to the house to get their hair done. And I have a car. And I've taught all 3 of my kids to drive down Box Canyon. And somehow found a way to get them a car. And, you know, I was just so proud of, like, the women they were becoming. And that inspired me to just keep living and kind of being their superhero. Like, I knew in the back of my head that I was kind of a hero to them. And I wanted to keep being that and provide them the best life that I could, because, you know, they had so much sadness losing their dad.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
Yeah, with no warning. No, they never had a chance to say goodbye, you know.
Yeah, that's got to be crazy,
Yeah.
man. I can't imagine.
Yeah. So,
all right.
gratitude.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Gratitude, God, gratitude.
Yep.
Okay, that's 2 good things to walk away with.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you again, Brenda, for doing this. It was really been an inspirational
Thank you for
story.
having
I'm
me.
so glad that you've come to the place that you have, and Justin too, for both of you
Thank you.
guys. It's a
Thank
great
you so
success.
much.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Okay.